Hi. Hi, good afternoon. My name is George. Um, I'm a mentor for the GADS 2020 program. I want to share with us this tutorial on Kubernetes Basics version 1.6. Of course, we know how, we should know how to get here. You copy the link and then paste it in a private browser window, and you should be here. Okay, let me quickly start this lab. And the reason why I want to start this lab is because this lab has an issue, and the issue is making it somewhat difficult for learners to follow the lab. There's an error, not necessarily well, I will call it an error because the calls have been updated, but the lab uses the old way of going about creating a deployment, and so it's causing a lot of confusion for learners. Okay, so I would quickly run through this lab, and I'll quickly run through this lab, and all right, so let's begin. Okay, you sign in using your credentials, and of course, pay special attention to task 0 or setup. I think this is an old Kubernetes quick labs lab session, because the newer versions have tasks written on here. So make sure you do this in an incognito window, and also make sure you do not use your normal Gmail accounts, else you will incur charges. And of course, when you get to this page, don't update anything. Simply click on the confirm and move to the next window. Okay, so we'll begin this lab, and I should quickly go through this lab, at least get to the point where people are having issues, and then from there I would expect us to be able to handle the rest of the labs. So let me we need to, I think the first thing we ought to do there is to we'll clone this Git repository. Okay, but meanwhile, all right. Okay, so we accept the terms. Accept the terms. Okay, and then we launch. Accept the terms, and we'll launch the shell. Cloud shell. We activate it. Okay, continue. All right, so I'm skipping some parts because we should set up our cloud shell by launching it, clicking here, and then list the current user authenticated users information by running this. You should see this. The name of the this email should be the same with this one here. The credential accounts, domain, just similar, like something similar to this. Config list the projects. It should list this particular project. Of course, the example output is here. Then the next fourth step here, you clone this repository. So that's the step I'm at now. So let's quickly clone that one. So I'm going to walk till that point where people are having issues. Then after that, I will leave each learner to continue from there. Okay, so we're supposed to change into this directory and then run this command list. So I'm going to do that now. All right, hit list again, and we have clean.sha deployments, nginx pods, services, and TLS. Those are the documents and directories that we can find in there. And of course, the contents of this directory, of the directories inside these directories, are listed out here. This deployment manifest, the configuration file, the pod manifest, services manifest, TLS certificates, and the cleanup script. Okay, so now let us quickly define your zone as a project default zone. Okay, so with this, you don't need to keep specifying which zone you want to use. Okay, so let's do that. Let's quickly do that. Okay, that's been updated. Okay, so we're going to create a cluster, and the cluster is going to have 5 nodes. Initially, the name of the cluster is going to be bootcamp, and we're going to give it a scope of storage, read and write. It's going to have access to read and write the cloud storage. So we do that. We create that cluster. Okay, let me bring this up a bit so you see what's going on. Ignore these errors. Ignore these warnings. Though it doesn't really matter if there were errors, your command would run. Those are just warning to tell you some stuff are not the way they used to be, and some things will stop working the way they used to work. And in this tutorial, we're going to see one of those things that has changed, and unfortunately many don't know, and they keep using the same old commands. So let's give this a few minutes to create that cluster. Meanwhile, you could click here, you could come up, scroll up, you come to Kubernetes, click on cluster. You should see that cluster being created. If you want to see the VMs, 5 of them, which are referred to here as the nodes, you would go to your compute engine page and VM instances. If you click, open that in another tab, you should be able to see that. So let's click out there. Let's close this. This is just links to learning materials that you can use to improve your learning and improve your skills. So the bootcamp cluster has been created, and let us see how many VMs. It should be 5, and even if it's not 5, eventually Kubernetes would naturally make sure your desired state is the same with your current state is the same with your desired state. So what we want is 5 nodes. So eventually it will do that to get that to 5 nodes. So meanwhile still creating. So let's go back to instructions. Okay, so after that, when that is done, we will check our progress. Then after that, we'll check the version of kubectl that we're using. Then we will also check the cluster info on the cluster we just created. Remember, the kubectl command is used when you are interacting with the cluster, but the objects that are in the cluster. But to interact directly with the cluster and do some certain things, you gcloud command will do that. But every other object within the cluster, you use the kubectl command to do that. Okay, so it's still provisioning some of that stuff. you forgive me, my network is a bit slow. Okay, so we are supposed to open the Compute Engine VM instances page to see the number of VM instances that would have been created. So we will see that. Okay, so this part is optional. Okay, this part makes it possible for you to use completions when you're running your kubectl command. I use this on my system because the commands are so many, I won't remember most of them. I don't remember most of them. So when I want to run a command I don't remember, I simply type kubectl and hit tab twice, and it presents options to me, and from there I can pick the one I'm looking for and then continue from there. So let's see. Okay, it's up. Let's see. All right, it failed to load. Let's refresh it one more time. So the cluster is up, but this page failed to load. So let's refresh it so that we see the number of VMs that were created. It should be 5 because our cluster creation command asks that initial created number of nodes should be 5. Okay, so that's it. We have 5 nodes running. Okay, so let's go back and see what's the next thing we're supposed to do. We're supposed to check our progress. So usually I give a minute or two after creating the cluster, because at times these UI may not be in sync with what is happening behind the scenes. So a minute or two of it and everything will be in sync. But let's see whether we're in order here. We are, so that has been accepted. So the next thing we're supposed to do is to check the version. This for me is not really necessary right now. Okay, so I dropped that here. Okay, obviously, okay, I have. Okay, I think I did something wrong. Okay, all right. So let me just click on the kubectl cluster info. We'll copy that one, come over here, and I drop that there. Okay, and hit enter. All right, so all right, so that's the information for the cluster. All right, so we'll leave that at that. Okay, let's move on to if you want to do this, you can do that if you want to, but I'm skipping that part. Now let's run and deploy a container. Now look carefully. The easiest way to get started with Kubernetes is to easiest way to get started with Kubernetes is to use the kubectl run command. Okay, so what are we trying to do here? Use this to launch a single instance of the Nginx container. Okay, if that's fine, that will go. You get the pods, you expose the deployment. Now this is where the problem is. This is no more regarded as a deployment, but just as not a deployment in the sense of deployment. It's a deployment, but it's just a deployment of just one pod, and it's referred to as a pod and not a deployment. So when you do this, click on that to copy that command, and then we run that command. It should take barely up to a second to do that. Then to get the pods, of course, we will see the pods because one pod will be created. Okay, all right, so we hit that. Okay, Nginx has been created. Now you come here and you say expose this. This won't work. Now let's copy that, but instead of exposing a pod, instead of exposing a deployment, we will expose a node. Now the problem with using this command, even if we change this to from deployment to pod, sorry, expose a pod, if we change this to a pod, when we run get services, we will run into issues because we did not create a service of the type they're expecting. So every other command after now will not work. So actually what we should be doing here is instead of running ngx this, which we did previously, let us quickly delete that, and let me quickly delete that. So instead of doing run, okay, let's create, okay, let's create a deployment. Let's create a deployment of okay, sorry, making a hell of a lot of mistakes here, don't worry. Okay, so instead of doing that, let's first of all delete the ngx pod that we deployed. So we actually deployed a pod, we did not deploy a deployment, or we did not create a deployment. Okay, so let me delete that. Okay, error, server doesn't have a resource type ngx. Okay, one moment, let's confirm kubectl gets pods. Oh gosh, I'm making a mistake there. Sorry, my network is a bit acting up. CTL. Okay. All right, so a pod exists. So let's kubectl delete. Oh, sorry, delete. Delete. Okay, see, I think I got that right. Delete pod ngx. All right, so delete pod ngx is gone. Okay, so we're working with command type and name. That's the format, command type and name. So that has been done. So this time around, instead of doing kubectl run, we create a deployment, and we call that deployment ngx, and use the ngx image version 1.1.0 as stated. Okay, so that has been created. Okay, so we've created a deployment of the type ngx, and using the ngx container image from Docker Hub. So now that instead of running this, you do create deployment and the rest of them, and it will go through. Then now when you do this will work, of course this will now work. So let's run this and see. So you put that there and you hit enter. Okay, it's been exposed, so a service has been created. Then when you run get services here, and it represents, so we have a service called ngx load balancer. With this, of course, the IP, external IP is still being allocated to that service. Okay, so we can now scale this deployment. Click on this. Let's run the other one, see if it's been given an external IP. Still pending. Run it again. Even if, okay, so let's paste that other one. Let's see if we can scale, and it will scale. So while the external IP was being given to that service, we scaled it, so it has an external IP now, and then we've scaled it. If we scaled it, we actually scale the deployment, have replicas of 3. So let's go back to the documentation and look at that. So use kubectl scale command to scale up the number of backend applications, that's the pods. make it replicas of 3. This is useful when you want to increase workload for a web application that is becoming more popular. Okay, so let's get the number of pods we are currently working with. Okay, so there are 3. Initially there were 1, so we now have 3. Okay, all right, so I will stop this lab from here right now because I don't intend to get to the end of the lab. Now the point of the point, or the reason why I did this, was because if you run this command the way it is here, you'll have issues. So rather than do kubectl run, you do kubectl create deployment nginx -image nginx 1.10.0. With that, you can now do every other thing that follows. So I'll stop the lab here, and that should be enough to help us clear out this error that we've been having.